Welcome back. Now we see the third point, conscience. Third aspect of conscience. 3 dimensions. We are mentioning 3 dimensions of moral conscience. First one we saw capacity. Then second one we saw as a process. Then the third one is conscience, the specific judgment. Conscience means the specific judgment of the good. The specific judgment of the good, which I must do, in inverted commas, I must do, which I must do in this particular situation. Conscience is the specific judgment of the good which I must do in this particular situation. Conscience moves us from perception and reasoning, to action. The general orientation to the good, to do the good, that is called synthesis, and the process of considering the relevant moral factors, that is moral science, converge to produce the judgment of what I must now do. And the commitment to do it. In coming to make this judgment, coming to the conclusion we say, no? In coming to make this judgment, many can help, but no one can substitute, for making the judgment. No one can substitute for making the judgment which only I can make, in inverted commas, only I can make. No one can substitute for making the judgment which only I can make. The characteristic of the judgment The characteristic of the judgment is always a judgment for me. Is always a judgment for me. It is never a judgment. It is never a judgment of what someone else must do. Of what someone else must do, comma, but only what I must do. But only what I must do. So here we are speaking of the third element, the third dimension of conscience. First is the capacity a person has, power within, and that is processed, reflected, perceived, then coming to action. So that action, what is the specialty of the action? Is not mere simple action, action of mind, action of the person, one who is a moral person, not somebody else. That's why he said, only I can make a decision. I means each one of us, one who is in the situation, after learning, after realizing, after reflecting, the outcome is the action, and that action is particular to that person. So that's the specialty of coming to practical judgment. Coming to practical judgment is after a long process. Person has the capacity and he has gone through the process of perceiving the reality and interpreting the reality and understanding the reality, and how I respond is my decision. Only I can make. Only you can make, only she can make. No others can substitute. Sometimes there are some situations. Somebody attend the class and write the exam somebody. So that will not work here in the conscience. Conscience will not work. You have to, it is your choice. It is your decision. It is your response. So there is a personal involvement is very, very important. And that's what very conscience speaks of. The conscience speaks of is not like downloading a file. We are accustomed to downloading files, no? Anybody can download. Anybody downloads, also same result will come. But conscience, no. If person changes, download will be different. Something will be downloaded, not the exact thing. So that's why individual personality and individual speciality is there in the conscience. The quintessence, the pure concentrated essence of anything is called quintessence. The quintessence of the dignity and the freedom of conscience, the dignity and freedom of conscience is to be found in the third dimension of conscience. Is to be found in conscience 3 or third dimension of conscience. I must always do what I believe to be right. What I believe to be right. And avoid what I believe to be wrong. I must always do what I believe to be right and avoid what I believe to be wrong. If a person truly believes if a person truly believes in his heart, that is, with one's whole person, that is, with one's whole person, that one line of action, rather than another, is God's objective call, then that line of action is no longer simply one option among many. Then that line of action is no longer simply one option among many. One action among many. It becomes the morally required line of action. It becomes the morally required line of action for that person to take, which is what we mean by being bound to follow one's conscience. By being bound to follow one's conscience. This third dimension of conscience cannot be violated. This third dimension of conscience cannot be violated. This is what Vatican Council II called, our most secret core and sanctuary. Our most secret core and sanctuary. Gaudium et Spes number 16. Gaudium et Spes GS 16. Where we are alone with God. Where we are alone with God. Philosophical also, in our philosophy class also we have seen, when you make a decision for one thing, or for example take, now all of us made a decision to be in the classroom. Then by this, what other decisions we have made? Negatively we have made some other decisions. Positively, this is the one decision. Negatively, in the same situation, we have made many other decisions. What are the other decisions? Not to be somewhere else. When we make an option for to be here, we also made the decision not to be there. Only one decision we can make. That is our limitedness and our positive action. So making a decision is only. So that's why coming to conclusion is not options. As long as you don't make a decision, there are many options. As long as you don't come to a conclusion, make a decision, and there are many options. Like we go, suppose we are going for a dinner, buffet, there are so many items are there. Some items you may like, some items you may not like, some items you cannot take. Suppose you take, you will have the problem. Yeah, in the same way in life also, some decisions you can take, you will be happy. Some decisions you cannot make, yet you make, then you have to suffer. So that way, lot of them. So, coming to this, making a decision with the conscience is the obligation and only obligation. Suppose you feel my responsibility is this one. In this situation, I have to respond this way. And that is what the will of God also is understood. Will of God, when you study the situation, perceive the reality, and rightly you understand, then you rightly respond. So when you make your response in right way, that is the only. That's why I said, only I must make. Only I can make the decision, not others. Suppose you are hungry, somebody eats your hunger satiate. No, that will not work. Same way, when you are in the situation, it is your response and your decision that counts. And it is your conscience, not evaluated by somebody else. Same thing can be evaluated by somebody else as wrong. That's why St. Paul says, no? St. Paul says, when food is offered to idols, some are eating and some are scandalized. Those who are eating, no problem. Because they have a right understanding, a mature conscience. So they are, suppose they are going for friends, for the sake of friendship, they may share. So they are not offended. But the scrupulous people are scandalized by seeing this. That's why St. Paul says, for the sake of these scrupulous people, better not you don't take. For you, no problem. But for others, is a problem. So, but here conscience, that is not the way. Conscience, your conscience is important, not somebody's conscience. Not somebody's this one. So, this third aspect of dimension of conscience is the full-grown conscience. So, conscience, 3 steps. You follow? Conscience, there are 3 steps are there, 3 dimensions. First one is the synesthesis. Synesthesis is a capacity within. Every person has, not only few. God has given to every human person. And how much developed is different. And how much degrees is different. That is another. Capacity is there. Then, process. The process is seen as a moral science, education. And that's why the education field, when till become adults, they are given the process of learning life. Actually, the education is not learning the alphabets, learning the life. How to live a better human person, a mature human person. That is the goal of education. Enlightenment is the goal of education. But we are sad to see the education in the full process that is not seen. Is seen only piecemeal. In the whole scenario, if this is taken, it's good. But some stop with this one. Like example of understanding the elephant. One saw only ear as the elephant. That person understood only elephant means ear. Other one trunk, other one is leg, other one is tail. Provided all these includes in the same elephant. And different dimensions are there. So also in understanding conscience also, all this long process has to go. Is a long process has to go. Where this long process is going? In our life. In our rational capacity, in our volitional capacity, in our emotional capacity, in our social living, in our personal living. So everywhere this is there. So conscience is part of us. Is not one faculty, is the whole human person is included. So we have to reach this goal of making a right choice in a situation, and that is called maturity. The person's maturity is seen in a person's response to the situation, and that situation, if this process is not taken, if you are not perceived the reality rightly, then you make wrong decisions, like diagnose. If you are not diagnosed well, then your wrong sickness and wrong treatment will be there, which is on the contrary will spoil the health, not helping the health to regain. So that's one of the important aspect of this one. So we have to remember conscience has 3 dimensions, and the 3 dimensions, the third dimension is we have to reach up to that. So some stop in capacity only, first stage. First stage they make, yes, I can understand, they don't want to understand, they will say, I understand, I can understand. That's called capacity, can means. Then process means, that's why some they bunk the classes. In life also, not only in the matter, they bunk the classes, they don't want to know which is right, which is correct. Because once you know which is correct and which is wrong, then you have the obligation to opt for the good. So they don't want to know. Let there be options. Yes, all are possible. So that is called irresponsibility. Not taking up, not involving oneself to know the reality. Then once these 2 are over only, third one will come as a result. If the 2-1 has not done well, result will not be correct. There will be some result, some action, that will be wrong action. So that is what where a person goes wrong. Okay, any clarification? Yeah, if there is clarification we give, otherwise we go for the next point. 4th point, formation of conscience. Formation of conscience. Formation of conscience. Formation of conscience will involve more than simply answering. Formation of conscience will involve more than simply answering the practical moral questions. The practical moral questions. What ought I to do? What ought, O-U-G-H-D, ought I to do? In inverted comma is the question, what ought I to do? It must also address the prior moral question. The prior moral question. What sort of person ought I to become? What sort of person I ought to become? There are 2 things we are referring. What ought I to do, doing, and the other one is what sort of person I must become. So this is this one. This means the aim of formation of conscience. This means The aim of formation of conscience is not simply to increase a person's knowledge of facts, is not simply to increase a person's knowledge of facts and values. Knowledge of facts and values. It must also include the fuller texture of the person's moral character. Person's moral character. Conscience is properly formed in dialogue with several sources. Of moral wisdom. As humans, we consult our own experience. As humans, we consult our own experience as well as the experience of family, friends, and colleagues. As humans, we consult our own experience as well as the experience of members of family, friends, and colleagues. We analyze and test the stories. Stories, images, language, rituals, and actions by which the various communities in which we participate or live the moral life. As Christians, we turn to the testimony of Scripture. As Christians, we turn to the testimony of Scriptures, the religious convictions of our creed. The lives of saints. And the informed judgment of theologians. Both present and past. Christian communities have access to a rich heritage of stories. Christian communities have access to a rich heritage of stories, images, language, rituals, devotional practices, and spiritual discipline which nurtures one's moral vision and practice, And as Catholics, we pay attention to our rich heritage of stories, images, and practices, as well as to the official teachings of the magisterium, So here we are explaining about how a person develops a conscience in dialogue with several sources. So here we see 3 levels. First, as human beings, irrespective of any religion, every human person. So what is the one's immediate relationship with family? A person is born in family. Without family, no one is there. All, rich or poor. Even the orphans, we say, the orphan also is born to a particular parent. So that's all. Then friends, family members, and near ones that they form. Then secondly, as Christians, again, the teaching of the Gospels, the teaching of the Christ, and again the stories, the life of saints, and teaching of the theologians. So all these reflect or influence the formation of conscience of the person. Then we are limiting now. As humans means universally. As Christians means all the Christians, all the denominations, all those who follow Christ are the Christians. Now, particularly as Catholics, as Christians, we have theologians, we have personal experience, we have our family, our community, all that is there. Then add to that our relationship or our influence of the official teachings of the magisterium. Also helping to form a mature right conscience. So that is the specialty, that is the source, the different sources. So these are the different sources available for us as Catholics. As humans, only few sources are there. As Christians, only few sources. But as Catholics, added to all these, there is something special, is a teaching office of the church. Magisterium means teaching office of the church. That's why Pope and cardinals and bishops and priests, all that is a hierarchy of teaching is there. And that is what as Catholics we obey, we imbibe. So that's one of the important source of forming a mature conscience.